93% of young Iraqis consider the U.S. to be an enemy. The poll included 250 face-to-face interviews in 3 Iraqi cities, plus another 3,250 interviews in 15 other countries throughout the Arab world, all with men and women ages 18 to 24. So this is the question they were actually polled in the survey. Do you consider the United States a strong ally, somewhat of an enemy, or a strong enemy of your country? So as you can see, while the Gulf Arab states and North Africa largely consider the U.S. to be an ally, the majority of young people in Iraq, Yemen, and the Palestinian territories consider the U.S. to be an enemy. So in my mind, this is not that complicated of an issue. You have an unjust war, or had an unjust war in Iraq, and these young people grew up in an environment where family, friends, people around them, civilians, were dying during this unjust war, and an unjust war led by the U.S. So you can understand why kids growing up in that environment, who are now 18 to 24-year-olds, would view the U.S. as an enemy. In a speech leading up to the war, then Vice President Dick Cheney cited experts who claimed Iraqis would erupt in joy over the invasion, predicting it would result in strong bonds created between the two countries. So obviously that did not happen. Another part of the survey that I actually found really interesting was their views on religion. So we generally consider this part of the world to be much more religious than us here in the West, for example. But when you actually take a look at the data of how young people feel about religion, this is the question that was posed. Religion plays too big of a role in the Middle East. So 52% of young people in these countries agree that religion plays too big of a role in the Middle East. So while we may think of these regions as much more religious, the reality is that a lot of young people living in these areas don't want it to be seen as religious. They don't want it to be religious. They want to grow up in a world where information and science is a part of that world, is a part of that policy making. And that also goes towards other aspects of this. So this is not just about religion. They actually pose a lot of different questions in this survey. And another area that they asked about here was gender issues. Across both genders, strong majority said that rulers must do more to promote women's rights in countries. So again, this is not a typical thought that we would have with the Middle East. And the last question I'm going to get to here is about their view on ISIS. Participants overwhelmingly rejected ISIS, predicting that it would fail in its goal of remaking the region and would be insupportable even if it didn't resort to extreme violence. So again, we consider a lot of this part of the world to be more conservative, have less access to information, be less progressive than we are. When in reality, the young people in these countries, young people growing up in these countries, want a more progressive approach in their government. What we really need in this area of the world is a humanitarian approach, as opposed to an approach that is based on perpetual war.